Machiavelli discovered something disturbing. Most people are not destroyed by enemies, external forces. They destroy themselves, feeding 7 invisible forces that work in silence. And the cruelest part? While you're sabotaging yourself, someone is watching and using it against you. From an early age, Machiavelli warned that the world is not a safe haven. It is hostile terrain where every carelessness becomes a weakness. And that is why many fail without realizing it, not because they lack opportunities, but because they carry within themselves enemies more dangerous than any external rival. Among these enemies, indifference is the first and most silent. It is born when the individual ceases to care, when they observe their own life as one watches a boat adrift. But those who drift never reach the top. Machiavelli saw in this behavior a clear sign of weakness. The man who does not get involved, who does not put intensity into what he does, is already defeated before he even begins. He said that life only reveals its paths to those who give themselves entirely, because it is in total effort that the truth appears, whether to confirm an opportunity or to show that it is time to follow another path. Even so, many wait for perfect conditions, believing that they will only give their best when they find a superior destiny. But this illusion only prolongs stagnation. The question that Machiavelli would leave us wondering is simple and unsettling. How can anyone intend to govern anything if they cannot govern their own impulse to act? And here comes the Machiavellian part that few people notice. While you don't care, others do. Your boss has already noticed your apathy and decided you don't deserve the promotion. Your competitor noticed your lack of intensity and took the position that was yours. For Machiavelli, indecision was one of the most revealing marks of human frailty. Machiavelli was brutal when he wrote in speeches. Indecision is always harmful, and nothing good comes from it. He observed people who, faced with the simplest choices, froze as if any movement could shatter their very existence. And this paralysis, though seemingly harmless at first, transforms into a slow poison. Perhaps you have experienced this. The feeling of standing before 2 doors and being unable to cross either, fearing to miss the opportunity of the other. Days pass, then weeks, and suddenly all that remains is the weight of having chosen nothing. Machiavelli said that this is the fate of men who expect too many guarantees from life. For him, the world did not reward those who sought absolute security, but rather those who possessed the courage to move even when the terrain seemed uncertain. The decision, in his view, was not just a gesture, but a declaration of existence. He reminded us that even error can be more valuable than stagnation, because error teaches, reveals, strengthens. Indecision, on the other hand, empties. It creates an inner void where nothing grows, a lifeless field where time passes without leaving any trace of learning. It's common to see people who know exactly what they need to do, but hesitate so much that they end up missing the ideal moment. Perhaps you've already felt this discomfort, that strange silence that appears when you realize someone has taken the lead while you were still thinking. It's a cruel reminder that the world doesn't wait. Every time you avoid choosing, you teach your own brain that you're not capable of taking risks. With each hesitation, you diminish yourself, and when you finally try to act, you no longer recognize your own strength. The Machiavellian provocation remains. How much of your life have you already lost by not moving? And more importantly, how much are you still willing to lose? Indecision doesn't happen all at once. It arrives like a whisper, then becomes a habit, and when you realize it, you're already living a life you didn't choose. You only tolerated. How many times have you been overtaken not because you were inferior, but because... Stop halfway? For Machiavelli, doubt was more than an uncomfortable feeling. It was a force that tore apart the human spirit before the world even had a chance to test it. He saw seemingly strong men lose everything because, deep down, they didn't believe in their own worth. Doubt doesn't arrive shouting. It approaches slowly, like a polite visitor you allow in out of politeness, until you realize too late that it has taken over the whole house. And the cruelest thing is that doubt disguises itself as prudence, when in reality, it is just refined fear. Machiavelli insisted that a man who doesn't trust himself cannot even command his own destiny. Worry, in turn, was for him a sophisticated form of waste. It consumes energy, corrodes clarity, and creates imaginary scenarios that will never happen. Machiavelli observed how some people walked the streets carrying storms that only existed inside their heads, and how this made them vulnerable to any external influence. Worry produces a subtle but dense fog that prevents the individual from seeing simple opportunities. Many fail not because they encountered great obstacles, but because they were too busy trying to predict a threat that never came. This is where the rupture occurs. If doubt stems from a lack of confidence and worry stems from a lack of perspective, which one has been dominating your life without you realizing it? How many opportunities have slipped away because of this pair of silent forces? Machiavelli believed that liberation began with the act of observing one's own mind with dispassion. He said that doubt only thrives when you treat it as truth, and that worry only dominates when you confuse it with responsibility. For him, clarity was a political and psychological act, separating what is real from what is imagined. And this distinction, though simple, is what differentiates the man who advances from the one who surrenders. Often, the greatest battle occurs when no one is watching, at the exact moment when you need to decide whether to believe in your own ability or to succumb to inner shadows. But one question remains, nagging like an echo that refuses to fade. Do you really know how much of your current suffering is the result of external realities, or of wars that you yourself created? Machiavelli observed that many men failed not for lack of ability, but for excessive caution. He described figures who possessed real talents but lived on the fringes of their own lives, waiting for an impossible sign that would confirm that everything was safe enough to act. On one occasion, he recounted the story of a merchant who spent years studying the perfect market to start his business. While he accumulated analyses, maps, and forecasts, another man, less prepared and far less brilliant, opened a small makeshift stall on the same street. In a short time, he became a landmark in the city. The cautious scholar continued to wait for the ideal condition, which never came. It was not the risk that destroyed him, but the obsession with avoiding it. Machiavelli said that excessive prudence acts like an invisible leash, tightening a little more each year until it silently empties any ambition. There are even more curious stories. In Florence, a young craftsman refused 3 opportunities to work for influential families because he feared he was not ready. When he finally decided to try, he discovered that his skill had been surpassed by younger apprentices who simply took the risk first. This dynamic, which seems improbable, is more common than one might imagine. Intelligent people trapped in labyrinths built by their own fear. Machiavelli believed that the world is not conquered by the most prepared, but by those who dare to face uncertainty. He saw risk not as an enemy, but as the price of relevance, and asserted that seeking absolute security transforms any life into captivity. Machiavellian thought confronts the modern illusion that it is possible to live without risks. He reminded us that even remaining where we are is a risk, because the world changes and those who do not keep up become obsolete. Excessive caution creates a small, protected, but profoundly sterile existence, and when a person realizes what they have lost, it is too late to recover the time. That is the cruelty. The danger lies not in acting, but in not acting. And the question Machiavelli would leave us with is inevitable and cutting. How many opportunities have you let die by hiding behind the word prudence? Or, for Machiavelli, pessimism was a poison that blinded individuals to all that could still be built. He observed how some people, faced with a small setback, began to see the entire world as a threat. It was as if each step was accompanied by a shadow that distorted reality. One day, he recounted the case of an apprentice who refused a great opportunity because he believed that something would go wrong. Later, he discovered that someone else had taken his place and transformed that chance into wealth and influence. The reversal destroyed him more than any real risk would have. Machiavelli knew that those who nurture negative thoughts end up living in a labyrinth created by their own minds, and that this labyrinth becomes so convincing that it seems impossible to escape. The most dangerous thing is that pessimism whispers logically, as if protecting you, when in fact it steals your strength. And it is at this point, when everything seems stable, that the mind can turn against itself without warning. The question that follows is simple and unsettling. How many times have you prematurely lost what you would have already achieved if you had dared to try? Machiavelli believed that the last and most destructive human weakness was the habit of complaining. He saw in this behavior a sign of silent resignation, as if the individual were handing over their own destiny to fate and accepting to live as a spectator of themselves. Complaining dissolves the energy that should be used to act. It makes the world smaller and the future more distant. And the saddest thing is that, often, we don't even realize when we begin to give in to this impulse. Machiavelli would say that each repeated complaint is like a stone placed before one's own feet until the path disappears and life becomes a desert built by one's own voice. But he also believed in the human capacity to turn the tables. For him, strength begins the moment you decide to monitor your thoughts, interrupt the cycle of doubt, abandon worry, challenge fear, reject pessimism, and take full responsibility for each step. Change doesn't happen all at once, but begins with a simple gesture, choosing to act even when willpower fails. All the concepts presented here can be applied today, without special preparation, without waiting for the perfect opportunity. Simply observe your own attitudes honestly and choose a clear direction, however small it may seem. Movement creates strength, and strength creates destiny. If this video helped you see something dormant within yourself, leave a like, share your vision in the comments, even anonymously if you prefer, and subscribe to the channel to continue strengthening your mind and your strategy every day. This marks the beginning of a journey that only you can lead. The difference between being manipulated and being respected lies in a simple decision. Stop beating the 7 murderers. When indifference strikes, take action for 5 minutes. When indecision weighs heavily, choose and correct along the way. When doubt arises, act as if you believe. Confidence will follow. When the worry grows, ask yourself if it's real or imagined. When fear paralyzes you, remember that inaction is riskier. When pessimism takes over, look for a fact that contradicts it. When a complaint arises, turn it into action or silence. Machiavelli said, "Men follow paths already trodden, but repeated paths lead to the same destinations." Over the next 3 days, observe how many times you feed each killer. The first step to avoid being manipulated is to see how you are sabotaging yourself. If this video has awakened you in the right way, leave a like, comment anonymously if you want, and subscribe to strengthen your mind and your strategy. Knowledge without action is entertainment, and Machiavelli didn't write to entertain you. He wrote to protect you.